everybody. It's right on time. That's a first for us. We're usually 5 or 10 minutes late. Ryan was telling me that that picture that shows up for you guys before we start counting down, he says we got to get a new picture. I was looking at that and I'm like, who the hell is that guy? Thank you for joining us. We've been sitting around waiting patiently on the gun issue to see if there was anything that would move. Nothing's moving, and I'll explain to you why. And we'll see what happens. So let's do a couple of things with the federal first. Again, the federal case right now, on the Second Amendment that we've talked about many times, they argued that in front of the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals on this issue of whether or not the outright blanket ban on this unidentified list of weapons violates the Second Amendment. The arguments being made by some of them that are kind of leading that effort are very good. They haven't argued equal protection yet. We still have an equal protection argument we can raise at a later date if we have to. But, that's in front of the Seventh Circuit now. And we'll see what the Seventh Circuit does with that. I'm convinced, for what it's worth, that this issue, once it makes it to the United States Supreme Court, this type of blanket ban of these types of weapons in general is not going to survive. When is it going to get to the United States Supreme Court? I don't know, but it's going to get there because it's this, these liberal states across the nation are passing these bans, these outright blanket bans on these weapons. So, somebody says Seventh Circuit showed their hand with Naperville. I don't know I don't know if that's true or not. I certainly understand the point that you're making. You could be right, but I believe that the United States Supreme Court, the reason they didn't take the Naperville request, as you're aware, is because I think the United States Supreme Court's waiting to see what these lower courts do with what to me was a pretty straightforward analysis in Bruin. And, I think there's going to be a reluctance on some of these circuit courts in the federal system to follow Bruin. It's just life, but they're, we're going to see. But yeah, the Seventh Circuit's going to have to give a decision. And once they give a decision, then we'll see what the parties do. And again, I'm convinced at some time, will we get it this year? Boy, I don't know. The United States Supreme Court's going to hear this issue. And you guys sort of use firearms, use weapon. You want to get cut up on those vernaculars. You're never going to win these arguments because nobody cares, right? We all know what we're talking about. So let it go. I'm going to say AR-15 or assault weapon. You're all going to start frazzling out. Go ahead and keep doing that, and you're never going to win these arguments. So let it go. All right. So that's the federal court. Then the issue with the state court, right? Before we talk about the firearms, what about the Safety Act? Remember the cashless bail thing on the Safety Act, that decision that was handed down by the Illinois Supreme Court? With all the respect I could muster for the Illinois Supreme Court, keep in mind there was a dissent in that case. That was probably one of the worst legal opinions I've ever read in my life. It didn't make any sense to me whatsoever, but it is what it is, right? So how do you think that's going to work if we're talking about the assault weapon ban? I'm going to use it on purpose just so I can get everybody over there frizzling. It's not an assault weapon, Tom. Let it go. What are we going to do here, right? When we filed our case, arguing equal protection, among other things, the procedural issues as well, I was well aware of the makeup of the Illinois Supreme Court, right? So what do you do when you have to deal with that reality? You put the best case together you could possibly put together, and you make your argument so compelling and so strong that even those in the court system who may generally be inclined to not like what we're arguing, that they still have to find in our favor. Because don't be naive. Judges are human beings too. That's not a bad, they're human. So they have a belief structure like you have. Try their best to set that aside when they're ruling on issues. But again, don't be naive. When we choose people for these higher courts, especially think about the federal United States Supreme Court, do you think that potential justices' inclinations as a man or a woman aren't taken into account? Of course it is, right? And that's just life. It doesn't mean that you can't win arguments with them. It just means you better make a damn good argument. Does that make sense? You really got to be ready. You really have to be ready. That's what we were working for in our case. And then what happens? You get a politician, Mr. Calkins, who takes your complaint, when I say your, because you're my clients, I did it for you, copies and pastes it and runs to Macon County, then runs to the Supreme Court with a case that's not fully developed. We've had this conversation, but I'm repeating it to you to make the point that I'm going to make to you. Runs to the Supreme Court without a fully developed case, without all of the information that you want to have in that case to where when you're going and making an argument to people that may generally not be inclined to want to give you what you're asking for. I fight in courtrooms every day with judges that maybe philosophically don't like what I'm asking for, but if I make a good enough argument, I can get it. Well, Mr. Calkins didn't do that. He ran willy-nilly, and guess who was asking him to run willy-nilly? The governor, attorney general. Why do you think they were asking that? Don't be naive. Okay. So anyway, they argued that case in front of the Illinois Supreme Court, the assault weapons ban. Our case, in my opinion, unprepared. They argued it, and they're waiting for a decision from the Illinois Supreme Court on whether or not that law violates, among other things, Illinois equal protection. So we have our case in Effingham County. The injunction's still in place. All of the clients can still do whatever they want to do. But as far as our discovery, where we're really wanting to come at a man and just lay it out on what's going on in Illinois, the judge took it under advisement and he's not issued a ruling on our discovery request. What that means is the judge has decided that he wants to wait until the Illinois Supreme Court makes a decision before he makes a decision on our discovery request. Again, I'm not going to criticize for that. Not an improper decision. That's not the decision I was looking for you or for us, but that's the decision the judge made. By not ruling on that, the discovery issue, in effect, it means we can't move forward with what we're asking for, which is what the governor and the attorney general and the Illinois legislature have always wanted, because they don't want us digging up the skeletons. Because those skeletons that I was trying to dig up is how we would have had the best chance to win this argument in front of the Illinois Supreme Court. Does that make sense to you guys? And I'm sorry, I'm still frustrated about that, because a Weasley politician who didn't have enough good sense and should have had enough good sense gave them what they wanted, which was an underdeveloped case on this issue in front of an Illinois Supreme Court whose general inclination is going to be to not give us what we as the gun owners want. That's just life, right? Again, it's not a criticism. Anybody that works in my profession knows that that's the truth. Doesn't mean anybody's a bad person or a dishonest person. You come and ask me, if Tom DeVore is a judge, hypothetically, and somebody's asking me to rule in a way that takes gun rights away, my general inclination is going to be no. But that doesn't mean that a zealous, good lawyer couldn't make arguments that I found compelling, going, man, I better think about that for a second, right? It's the same way, it's just opposite. The way to have dealt with that was to have the best case you could have ever had in front of them and just drive it home. Calkins screwed that up. And is that going to come back to really put a hurting on us? Going to find out whenever we get a decision out of the Illinois Supreme Court. So until we get that decision out of the Supreme Court, I can't give much more direction on what we can do, because our case, for all intents and purposes, can't move forward until that happens. And if you're frustrated about that, send Mr. Calkins a message and tell him thank you, because he's completely responsible for that. Okay? So the discovery that we're wanting to get, we still have to wait, because the court's not letting us push forward on that. Okay? So that's where the gun cases are at, right? The reason that we haven't been proceeding forward is because that state court case of Calkins has kind of set us in limbo. The injunction's still in place. It's been now how many months now? If you're a party in this case, you represented by us, you've been under a court order able to buy whatever you wanted to buy. And if you haven't chosen to do that, I don't know what to say other than you made that choice consciously, right? Because you could if you wanted to. Let me see. I might take a question or two here, and then that's about all we got, guys. That's a good question. Even if our case takes longer than January 2024, we are protected, question mark. The answer is I don't know the question. I don't know the answer to that today. I'm quite certain that the Illinois Supreme Court will rule before January 2024. So once that happens, we'll have that conversation. But that was a good question. Johnny, or who said that? Chris, I did my part and I spent way more than enough money to pay for my fee 100 times over. Well, again, that was part of what you hired me for. Like I said, for those of you that joined this case and you spent a couple $100, you've had 6, 7 months now to go buy whatever you wanted. And I'm not on the case. You know, I didn't put myself in your guys' case. So you're able to do things I can't. I'm not answering that question, Dave. Should we register anything? I'm not answering that question. The law says that there's supposed to be a registry. And I can't tell you not to do something that the law says you're supposed to do. But let's talk about registry when the time comes to talk about. It's only August right now. We got 4 months. So let's have a conversation about that later. Okay, let's don't talk about it today. Let me see. I got to answer that for a second. Somebody says, does it do any good to buy something now if we have to give it back later? With all due respect, how do you possibly know that? Have you already concluded for yourself, oh, I got to give it back later? You guys, the law on what we're dealing with here, there is no developed law on any of this. So for anybody to say, oh, I got to give it back later. Do you? Really? Who's going to make you give it back? How are they going to make you give it back? So that kind of conversation, with all due respect, is dangerous. It's really dangerous. If you don't want to buy something, don't buy it. But don't go out concluding, well, I'm not going to buy it because I got to give it back later. Guys, it doesn't make any sense. Nobody has the answers to those questions. The only person that has the answers to that question is the guy upstairs. And he's, again, this is probably well below anything that he is concerned about as it relates to humanity. So don't make those assumptions, please. All right. I think that's about it. Civil disobedience is always an option. I love that, right? Just think if we'd have had some civil disobedience back in 2020 when y'all got told because of COVID that you had to slap masks on your kids and you couldn't leave your house. Civil disobedience would have ended it like that, but people were scared and civil disobedience didn't happen. I can tell you, again, you're getting off the law here, with 100% certainty that as our society progresses, maybe we won't be here anymore. Civil disobedience will solve everything. Because remember what Tom always tells you, what's the law say? It says whatever you say it says. That's what the law says. There's no magic wand about the law. The law says what you, the people, say it says. But when people don't participate and get involved, they can get things crammed down their throats sometimes. So I love civil disobedience. I think it's great. Let me see here. I think that's it. Okay. Who says they can withdraw money from your bank account as a penalty? Come on, Mark. Don't say nobody can draw that money out of your account as a penalty. The first one of you that gets money drawn out of your account by the Illinois government as a penalty for buying a weapon, call me. I'll represent you for free and guarantee you what? None of you are ever calling, because that's not possible. Mark, don't say stuff like that. Can you elaborate? This is my last question. Can you elaborate more on the TRO expiring on January 1st, 2024? I read that question. Have I me ever said to you at any point in time that the TRO is expiring on January 2024? No, I've never said that to you. So why on God's earth would you be talking about the TRO expiring on January 2024? We people, and put Tom in there with you, are our own worst enemies because we listen to all this garbage going on out in the world and we draw it into our mind and we make conclusions based upon things we don't even know if it's true or not. You got to quit doing that because government uses that against you. If you're in this case and you're subject to the TRO, if I've not told you something, then don't believe it. There's nothing to say that the TRO that we have expires in January 24. Might it expire? Could it expire by a court order or the Illinois Supreme Court? Maybe. But as of today, that's complete conjecture. It doesn't even make any sense. So please quit doing that. I will tell you. I will be on a video telling you that. I promise you. If you haven't heard it, it ain't happening. All right, guys. That's it. Don't worry about January 1st, 2024. Don't worry about January 1st, 2024. There's plenty of time to worry about that. Nobody knows the answer to that question. J.B. Pritzker doesn't know the answer to that question. Kwame Raoul doesn't know the answer to that question. I don't know the answer to that question until we see what the Illinois Supreme Court does. And I think they'll do it long before January 1st. Okay, guys, love you. Take care.